Welcome to HardScript.
Help me reach 5,000 subscribers. Support the video with a like and leave your thoughts in the comments. She said it casually, like she was reading a menu. She said it at dinner, with other people at the table, with a glass of red wine in her hand. She said he couldn't go a day without touching her. She didn't look at me when she said it. She smiled at the table, not at her plate, not at her fork. I said I could go forever. Her fork hit the plate. Not loud. Sharp enough that everyone heard it. My name is Daniel Carter. I'm 39. I'm a design engineer. I build systems that don't forgive sloppy thinking. I've spent my life learning how to pause before I speak, how to measure twice and cut once, how to stay quiet while other people fill the room with noise. That night, I didn't raise my voice. I didn't ask a question. I didn't explain myself. I just leaned back and let the silence do what it always does. It exposed everything. The dinner wasn't supposed to be a trap. It was one of those industry meetups she liked, restaurant people and friends of friends, all smiles and social currency. She worked PR for restaurant groups, lived for rooms like that. Attention was oxygen to her. She wore the Pandora bracelet I'd given her 3 years earlier, twisting it around her wrist while she talked, like it still meant something. I knew who he was the moment she mentioned him. Mark Ellis. Loud in high school. Still loud now. A guy who built his life on handshakes and late nights, who confused presence with power. I'd seen him once before, leaning too close, laughing too hard. I didn't confront it then. I logged it. That's what I do. On the drive home, the truck felt heavier than usual. My Chevy Silverado has always been steady, honest. No surprises. I didn't turn on the radio. I didn't replay the night. I just drove. The signs hadn't started at the dinner. They'd been there for months. Quick meals from Chick-fil-A eaten in silence. Her phone lighting up face down. Disney Plus running in the background at night while she scrolled. The house full of sound and empty at the same time. That night, she kept talking after the fork hit the plate. Filling space. I let her. I was already gone. Not physically. Not yet. But the decision had landed clean. Quietly. And once a decision like that settles, it doesn't move again. The morning after the dinner, the house looked the same. That's how I knew it was over. Same light through the blinds. Same coffee maker gurgling like it always did. Same quiet she used to complain about when she wanted noise instead of answers. I moved through it without rushing, without anger. Anger wastes energy. I've never been careless with energy. She slept in. Disney Plus was still paused on the TV from the night before, some animated color frozen mid-frame. Background noise she liked to keep running so silence wouldn't corner her. I shut it off without thinking. The room felt cleaner immediately. I didn't bring up the dinner. Not at breakfast. Not later that afternoon. Silence unsettles people who live on reaction. I could feel her testing it, throwing small comments into the air, watching to see if they landed. They didn't. I was already shifting weight, recalibrating. At work, I did what I always do when a system shows signs of failure. I reviewed inputs. I traced dependencies. I checked what was actually mine and what had only been shared by habit. By lunch, I knew exactly how much of my life could disappear without leaving a crater. The answer surprised even me. On the way home, I pulled into Lowe's. Not for anything dramatic. No big purchases. Just a quiet walk through aisles where decisions are practical and honest. Measuring tape. Storage bins. A new set of gloves. Things for hands that work, not hands that perform. Nobody noticed me. That mattered. That night, she wore the Pandora bracelet again, twisting it faster this time. She talked about her day, about restaurants, about people whose names I didn't bother to remember. She mentioned Mark once, casually, like it was a test. I didn't react. I watched the moment slide past her eyes. Confusion flickered. Then irritation. Then something sharper. Control doesn't like silence. Later, in bed, she reached for me out of habit. Not desire. Habit. I didn't pull away. I didn't lean in either. I stayed still. She froze, then laughed it off, rolling away with her phone lighting up the dark. The screen reflected off the wall. I turned my back and slept. The decision I'd made the night before wasn't emotional. It was structural. You don't argue with a cracked beam. You unload it. You step back. You let gravity do the rest. By morning, I had a timeline. Not for revenge. For removal. And removal, when done properly, leaves no debris behind. By the third day, she noticed the shift wasn't temporary. Silence has weight when it doesn't lift. She started watching me the way people do when they realize they're no longer the one steering. I didn't explain anything. Explanations invite negotiation. I wasn't negotiating. I began separating without making noise. Not emotionally. Logistically. I took inventory the way I would on a project site before demolition. What was structural? What was cosmetic? What could be removed without triggering alarms? At night, while Disney Plus hummed in the background again, I sat at the kitchen table with my laptop angled just enough that she couldn't see the screen. I listed old gear, tools I no longer needed, duplicates. I posted them on eBay under an account I'd opened years ago and forgotten about. Clean transactions. No questions. No conversations. Packages started leaving the house in small, unremarkable waves. She didn't notice at first. People who live for spectacle rarely notice absence until it's total. She was busy. Dinners out. Late nights. The kind of schedule that looks like momentum if you don't inspect it closely. Mark's name surfaced more often. Not directly. Through stories that didn't need telling. His laugh. His energy. His restaurants. I listened without reacting. I wasn't storing resentment. I was timing exits. One evening, she asked if everything was okay. Not concern. Curiosity. The kind that wants confirmation of control. I nodded and kept scrolling. The answer satisfied her just enough to stop asking. That was the mistake. Silence doesn't mean agreement. It means processing. The truck stayed packed lightly. Nothing obvious. No suitcases. Just a few things shifted under the back seat. A jacket. A box of documents. Essentials. I kept driving the same routes, coming home at the same time, parking in the same spot. Disappearances work best when there's no rehearsal. She wore the Pandora bracelet constantly now, like armor. She laughed louder on the phone. She touched my arm when other people were around. Not for me. For witnesses. I let it happen. Control needs an audience. I was removing the stage. The first thing she noticed missing was a small one. A mug. Then a charger. Then a jacket she didn't recognize as mine until it was gone. She asked about them casually. I said I didn't know. And I didn't. They were already past me. By the end of the week, my side of the closet had thinned enough to breathe. Not empty. Intentional. I slept better. Decisions do that. They simplify. She thought the dinner had been the moment she took something from me. She didn't understand it had given me permission. And permission, once granted, doesn't get returned. The shift became visible when she tried to provoke me again and nothing happened. Provocation only works if there's resistance. I had stopped providing friction. I moved through the house like a contractor finishing a job after hours, precise, invisible, leaving no mess behind. One night, she came home late, the kind of late that smells like cologne and victory. She talked louder than necessary, dropping her bag on the counter, letting keys clatter. She wanted noise. She wanted a reaction. I kept rinsing a plate, methodical, slow, like the sound didn't reach me. When I passed her, she brushed against my arm on purpose. Not intimacy. Demonstration. I didn't turn my head. Later, while Disney Plus filled the living room with artificial cheer, I sat at the dining table and finished closing loops. Passwords updated. Accounts separated. Access points reviewed. I wasn't hiding anything. I was extracting myself. There's a difference. One leaves traces. The other leaves blanks. I took another quiet drive to Lowe's the next evening. Same aisle. Same pace. Picked up a couple of things I didn't immediately need, but would. The kind of purchases that don't ask permission. I left them in the truck, unopened. Preparation doesn't need ceremony. She started asking questions that weren't really questions. Where I'd been. Why I was so calm. If something was wrong. Concern wrapped in suspicion. I answered with nods, with one-word acknowledgments that gave her nothing to grab. People like her need mirrors. I stopped reflecting. Mark's presence became less subtle. A photo on her phone she didn't hide fast enough. A name lighting up the screen at night. She wanted me to see it. To feel smaller. I felt lighter instead. Every confirmation made the structure of my decision cleaner. The Pandora bracelet never left her wrist now. It caught the light when she gestured, when she laughed too hard, when she leaned back like she'd already won something. She didn't understand it had become irrelevant. Symbols only work if someone is still reading them. By the end of that week, the house felt transitional. Not empty. Temporary. Like a rental after the boxes are packed, but before the keys are turned in. I slept on my side of the bed, already mentally elsewhere. I stopped setting my alarm to match hers. The last thing I did before leaving each morning was look around and note what remained. Not with regret. With confirmation. I wasn't running. I was finishing. She thought control meant escalation. She didn't understand that the quietest men don't escalate. They conclude. By the following Monday, she started performing confidence the way people do when they feel it slipping. Louder laughter. Sharper movements. She dressed like she was going somewhere important even when she wasn't. She wanted friction. I stayed smooth. That morning, I left earlier than usual. Not rushed. Intentional. I took the long route to work, the one that lets thoughts settle instead of collide. In the truck, I ran through contingencies the way I always have. If this, then that. If silence stretches, let it. If she escalates, don't meet her there. Absence isn't passive. It's precise. At lunch, I didn't eat. I drove instead. I parked behind a strip mall and finalized the last listings on eBay. Nothing sentimental. Tools I'd upgraded from. Old electronics. A chair I never liked. Each item leaving was a small confirmation that I didn't need closure. I needed clearance. When I got home that night, she wasn't there. The house was dark except for the blue glow of Disney, plus running without sound. Something animated was moving across the screen, mouths opening and closing, no voices. It felt appropriate. I shut it off again. I walked through the rooms and checked what remained. Her things dominated the space now. Shoes by the door. Bottles in the shower. Photos on the wall where I'd stopped seeing myself months ago. The imbalance was almost complete. That mattered. She came home later than usual, talking into her phone, voice low but animated. She didn't stop when she saw me. She smiled instead, like the sight of me was incidental. The Pandora bracelet flashed as she gestured, pacing, performing connection for someone who wasn't there. I went to the bedroom and closed the door. That night, I slept without turning toward her once. Not out of spite. Out of clarity. When you stop hoping, your body adjusts quickly. The next day, I took a half day off. I didn't tell her. I loaded the remaining essentials while she was gone. Clothes folded with care. Documents already boxed. No haste. No anger. Just completion. The truck took the weight easily. It always has. Before leaving, I stood in the doorway for a moment and looked back. Not at her things. At the space itself. The stage she'd needed so badly. The room where she'd thought power came from eyes watching and hands reaching. I turned off the lights and closed the door quietly. Not as an exit. As a conclusion. She still thought the game was active. It wasn't. She noticed the absence on the second night. Not the bed. Not the closet. The phone charger by the couch. The one I always used. She called out my name once, casually, like it was a test. When nothing answered back, the sound lingered too long. I wasn't there to hear it. I was parked across town, engine off, sitting in the truck with the windows cracked, letting the quiet settle into a new shape. I'd checked into a short-term place earlier that afternoon. No ceremony. No announcement. Just keys, a code, and a room that didn't know either of us. Her messages came in clusters. First neutral, then confused, then sharpened with humor, the kind that tries to pull a reaction out of thin air. I didn't read them right away. I don't interrupt processes once they're running. That night, she turned Disney Plus back on, loud this time. I could imagine it. The background noise pushed high enough to fill rooms, to pretend someone else was there. Sound as defense. I stayed still, sitting on the edge of a clean bed, phone face down. By morning, she escalated. Calls this time. Missed calls stack differently than texts. They look heavier. I let them stack. Silence works best when it's uninterrupted. She went looking for anchors. Drove by places she expected me to be. Work. The gym. Even Chick-fil-A, the one we used to stop at when conversation felt optional. I know because she posted a photo there later, smiling too hard, wrist angled just right, so the Pandora bracelet caught the light. Proof of relevance. Proof of nothing. I spent that day finalizing the last loose ends. Closed a storage unit I no longer needed. Transferred mail. Finished a few lingering listings on eBay from my laptop, the last pieces of a life that had already shifted categories. Sold. Shipped. Gone. By the evening, her messages changed tone. Shorter. Sharper. Less performance, more urgency. She asked where I was. Not because she wanted me back. Because the stage was empty and the lights were still on. I didn't answer. I went out for a walk instead. The air felt different when no one was waiting for you to react. My phone buzzed again. I turned it off. She thought disappearance was a tactic, something to counter. She didn't understand it was the end state. When a system removes itself cleanly, there's nothing left to engage with. The quiet wasn't punishment. It was permanent. By the third day of my absence, she stopped pretending it was temporary. Confusion hardened into urgency, urgency into spectacle. She needed witnesses. Without them, her narrative collapsed. She showed up at my office first. I wasn't there. I'd already taken personal time and informed HR through the proper channels. Clean, neutral, no drama. When she couldn't find me, she went online. Stories, vague posts about men who disappear and emotional cowards. The kind of language that looks powerful until there's no one left to provoke. I didn't see any of it directly. That's the advantage of deciding early. I let things reach me only if they mattered. None of it did. That evening, she went further. She drove to the house of one of my coworkers, asked questions framed as concern, smiled while she searched for confirmation that I was still reachable. He texted me afterward, confused. I thanked him and said nothing else. There was nothing to clarify. She tried the practical angle next. Money. Shared accounts she assumed would pull me back into conversation. She found them already separated. Bills covered. Transfers complete. No loose ends to yank on. The silence around logistics is louder than any argument. At night, she went back to the house and turned Disney Plus on again. Not as background this time. As a wall of sound. Something cheerful and constant, running long after midnight. I could picture her sitting there, scrolling, wrist twisting so the Pandora bracelet clicked softly against the glass table. A rhythm meant to remind her she still existed. I spent that night assembling shelves in the new place. Simple work. Physical. Grounded. The kind of thing I used to do at Lowe's on evenings when I needed my thoughts to line up. The difference now was that nothing was waiting on the other side of the door. No audience. No explanation required. The next morning, she sent one final message. Not angry. Careful. She said we should talk like adults. Said mistakes happen. Said the dinner had been taken out of context. She needed a response to complete the arc. She didn't get one. I powered my phone down and went for a drive. No destination. Just movement. The road doesn't ask questions. It just opens if you keep the wheel steady. She mistook silence for cruelty. She never understood it was mercy. I could have stayed and watched her perform remorse. Watched her rewrite history until it fit. Instead, I removed myself completely. When someone loses the stage, the applause stops. When the applause stops, they finally hear themselves. And that's the part no one prepares for. The silence started costing her something by the end of the week. Not reputation. Not money. Certainty. When noise fails, people turn inward, and that's where the real damage happens. She tried one last angle. Not directly with me. With the idea of me. She contacted my sister, framed it as concern, asked if I was okay. My sister didn't take the bait. She told her I was fine and didn't elaborate. Boundaries recognize each other immediately. The house began to feel different to her. Not lonely. Unstable. Furniture that once felt permanent started looking staged. Photos stopped working as proof. She moved things around, trying to reassert ownership of space that no longer responded. A stage without a lead actor doesn't stay convincing for long. Mark didn't help. He never would have. Men like him feed on reaction. Without it, they drift. He filled the silence with jokes, with touch, with presence that tried too hard. She let him. But even performance has limits when there's no one left to impress. One afternoon, she went through drawers looking for something specific. Not sentimental. Practical. She found the documents gone. The ones she assumed anchored me to the house. That's when it shifted from confusion to fear. Control only feels safe when there's leverage. She left the house and drove aimlessly, retracing familiar routes, trying to summon me back through geography. She stopped at the Chick-fil-A we used to sit in when we didn't feel like talking, ordered the same thing, took a photo, didn't post it. Without an audience, even nostalgia feels pointless. I spent that day setting the last pieces of my new routine. Work adjusted. Evenings quiet. Shelves aligned. The truck parked where no one expected it. I didn't feel relief. I felt alignment. Relief is temporary. Alignment holds. She sent another message that night. Longer this time. Controlled. Apologetic without admitting fault. She said the dinner had been misunderstood. That words had landed wrong. That people say things they don't mean. She needed my response to recalibrate reality. I didn't give it to her. Instead, I powered the phone off and went to sleep early. Not to escape, to conserve. Tomorrow wasn't about her reaction anymore. It was about the aftershock. When someone builds their identity on being seen, invisibility isn't just absence. It's collapse. The aftershock didn't come loudly. It never does. It arrived in fragments, carried by other people, the way news travels when no one wants to own it. She stopped posting. Not dramatically. Gradually. Stories first. Then photos. Then silence that didn't look intentional. The kind that suggests someone ran out of angles. Friends asked questions she couldn't answer without admitting she'd lost control of the narrative. Mark faded from the frame quickly after that. He didn't sign up for fallout. He signed up for applause. She tried one last structural move. Paperwork. Legal language. An attempt to force contact through process instead of emotion. It landed cleanly in my inbox because I'd planned for it. I forwarded it to my attorney and didn't add a word. Systems handle things better than people. I spent that weekend finishing the physical work of separation. I returned to Lowe's once more, not out of habit, but closure. Picked up the last items I needed to make the place mine. Not symbolic. Functional. When you build something solid, you don't decorate it with memories. At night, the quiet held. Not heavy. Balanced. I cooked for myself, ate slowly, cleaned as I went. The kind of rhythm you only get when no one is watching how you move. I slept without interruption. No buzzing phone. No background noise pretending to be connection. She reached out again after a few days. Not directly. Through someone else. A mutual friend who framed it as concern, as confusion, as unfinished business. I told him I was fine and thanked him for checking in. I didn't ask questions. Questions reopened doors. That's when it finally landed for her. The absence wasn't temporary. It wasn't strategy. It wasn't punishment. It was the final configuration. There would be no confrontation scene. No closure conversation. No dramatic reckoning she could point to and say, that's where it ended. It ended quietly, which meant she had to sit with it. I sold the last shared item that meant nothing to me on eBay that week. It shipped out without ceremony. The buyer left a 5-star review. Smooth transaction. No complications. I smiled at the simplicity of it. People think strength shows up when you stand your ground in the room. They're wrong. Real strength shows up when you leave the room and don't check to see who noticed. She wanted me smaller. Instead, I became unreachable. That was the moment everything reversed. The reversal didn't look dramatic from the outside. No courtroom scene. No late-night calls. No final apology delivered with perfect timing. It looked like nothing. And that was the point. A month passed. Then another. The world adjusted without asking my permission. Work stabilized into something cleaner. Evenings found their own rhythm. I stopped checking my phone out of habit and started checking it only when I needed to. That's when you know a system has reset. I drove the truck more on weekends. Not to escape. To move. Long stretches of road without commentary. No music some days. Just engine noise and distance doing what they do best. People underestimate how much clarity comes from uninterrupted forward motion. I finished the last small project in the apartment one Saturday morning. Tightened the final bolt. Stepped back. The shelves held. Everything aligned. I washed my hands and stood there for a moment, letting the quiet settle. Not the tense quiet from before. The kind that doesn't ask for anything. I heard through someone else that she'd stopped wearing the Pandora bracelet. Not out of sentiment. Because it reminded her of a version of control that no longer worked. Symbols lose power when there's no one left to interpret them. Mark moved on quickly. That didn't surprise me. Men like him always do. She stayed louder for a while, then quieter than anyone expected. Without a mirror, even the most practiced performance collapses into silence. I ran into her once by accident, weeks later, in a parking lot. No scene. No words exchanged. She looked at me like someone recognizing a building after it's been condemned. Still standing. Completely inaccessible. I nodded once and kept walking. The door closed without a sound. That night, I ate alone, slowly. No screen running. No background noise pretending to be company. I thought briefly about stopping by Chick-fil-A out of old habit, then smiled and cooked instead. Habits change when they're no longer required. People talk about closure like it's something another person gives you. They're wrong. Closure happens when your actions line up with your values and stay there. She tried to make me smaller in front of an audience. I answered by leaving the room entirely. Now I can go forever. and the quiet finally belongs to me. What would you have done in my place? If the story hit you, leave a like. And don't forget to subscribe. It only gets stronger from here.